Hello! In this video, you're going to learn how to create an invoice in QuickBooks Online. So the first thing we need to do is we need to open up the invoicing window, which we can do one of two ways. First, we can come up here to the plus button and we can click on Invoice, or we can come here to Sales and go to Invoices and then select New Invoice. Both of them do the same thing. So here we are in the invoicing window. Now the first thing you might be thinking is this does not look like the invoice that I set up in my custom forms. And that is true. This is just where you input your information. So the reason it doesn't look pretty is because this is quite literally where you're entering in data. Now the very first thing we're going to do is enter in our customer who we want to send an invoice to. So I'm going to enter in ABBA. Now, you'll notice that this area right here under billing address auto-filled in. If I had ABBA set up with a complete billing profile, all of that information would autofill here, as well as the customer's email address. Now, what happens if you are invoicing a customer for the first time and they're not in your system? Well, you click here on the dropdown and you scroll up just slightly and you go to Add New. We're going to type in the person's name. I'm going to type in RuPaul. And then we're going to press Save. And we have now added this customer to QuickBooks Online. So if you have not added in the customer email and you do want to send a digital invoice, then you have to put an email address in here. I'm going to put in my email so we don't accidentally send this to somebody. Next, we have the online payment section. By checking these boxes, you are telling QuickBooks which online payments you are willing to accept. Now, if you have not set up Intuit Payments yet, you can check these boxes, but nothing's going to happen because you have not actually set up payment processing. So if you do want to set up payment processing, there is a tutorial video on how to do that and what that means for your bookkeeping. But for now, we're going to pretend like we have set up payment processing and we're going to check both cards and free bank transfer. Now we're going to come down here to terms. If you are showing terms, then you can click here on the drop down and select the terms that you would like for this invoice. You can also add a new term. So let's say that you actually do a net 7, which means that the person has 7 days to pay your invoice. You're going to come here to add new, net 7, and then you can choose the payment term itself. So you can do a fixed number of days, which would be 7 in this case, or you can choose if you wanted to do due on the 15th, you could choose due on the 15th of every month. We're just going to come back up here to due in a fixed number of days. And we're going to press Save. Now we have the invoice date. So you can backdate and future date invoices in QuickBooks Online. So if you are preparing all of your invoices for the end of the month in advance, you can come here and you can select the end of the month. It will always default to today's date. Then we have the due date. So the due date is automatically going to correspond with the term. So that automatically happens. However, if you would like to adjust the due date, you can do that as well. Just click here on the calendar. And let's say we're like, yeah, I'm just going to give them an extra day because I'm sending this out late. We would click right there. Now over here, we have invoice number. If you are not using custom invoicing numbers, QuickBooks will automatically generate this for you and you cannot edit it. But if you have chosen to use custom invoice numbers, then you can click in this box and you can adjust it. So maybe we have a special naming convention that we use for all of our invoices and it looks something like that. We can type that in. So our invoice number reflects our naming conventions. If you've set up any sort of custom fields, they're going to show up here on the bottom. For example, project name. So we're going to say podcast website is the project name. So now we're going to enter in the actual line items on the invoice. So we're going to come down here to product and service and we're going to click, and you can either use the drop down to select a product or service, or you can start typing. So we're going to do web design services. And we'll notice that automatically the description that we set up in our product and service list, as well as the rate, will automatically fill in on this line here. Now, if you would like, you can add to the description. So maybe it's up to 5 web pages and you are going to name each of the web pages that you created. It's up to you. Then you're going to do the quantity. So maybe you did 10 web pages, so the quantity is actually 2. You can also adjust your rate. So even though this is the default rate, if you are charging someone more or less, you can change that here. And the amount will automatically calculate. And you can just go down the line and do this. So maybe we sold RuPaul some My Little Pony posters, like 100 of them. And we also did some general consulting with RuPaul as well. Now, QuickBooks will begin to add lines as you get further and further down, but if you need more lines, you just click on this button right here and go to add lines. And then if you would like to delete lines, like you're like, oh, I do not need this many lines, you're just gonna click on the little trash can to delete them. Clear all lines, I'm not gonna do it, but it'll cancel all of these lines and clear them out. And then we have add subtotal. This is pretty cool. You can add a subtotal to anywhere you want in the invoice. So let's say that RuPaul wants a subtotal for every single piece of the invoice. We just add the subtotal line, and then if you come over here to where the little dots are, you can move things around. With the subtotals, every time you put a subtotal line under a group of items, it'll subtotal those items. And then let's say that you're like, oh, actually web development and consulting should be together. You can move that around and we see that the subtotal now adjusts. We're gonna delete this. Let's come down here to message on invoice. Now again, you set this up as a default when you set up your custom form styles. But if you would like to add or edit anything, you can just click in the box and add. Message on statement. This is the description that will appear on the statement, which will help your customer understand what this invoice is. Then we have attachments. This is pretty cool. You can drag and drop any type of file to attach to the invoice, which will also be emailed with the invoice. So if you wanted to attach receipts for any expenses that you're also billing for, work samples, contracts, really anything, you can drag and drop that here. So we're gonna move over to this side of the invoice. And we have subtotal, which is the total of all of the lines. QuickBooks will do this for you. If you have chosen to display the discount box, this is what it's going to look like. You can click here and you can either do the discount based on percentage or value. So if I wanted to do a 10% discount, I would just type in 10. Then I'm going to hit my tab key and we see it automatically calculates a 10% discount and changes the total. I can also enter in a deposit if I have selected to display the deposit box. So let's say RuPaul gave me a $500 deposit. Again, I'm going to press tab. And now we have a deposit applied to the invoice as well as the balance due. Now, the last thing I want to show you is what this invoice would actually look like because when you send this or print it, it is not going to look like this. Now I'm going to come here to print or preview. And this is how the invoice will actually look. So it has all of those custom styles that we had made when we did our master invoice. So I'm just gonna close it right here. Now there's one more quick thing. If you wanted to use a different style, so let's say you had a special style for invoices with discounts, for example. If you came here to customize, you can select your different templates right here and choose from any of the templates that you've created. Now, the last step is to save your invoice. So we press save, and now your invoice is in QuickBooks Online. In the next video, I'm going to show you the different options for sending your invoice to your customers.